After the young master lost his sight, his fiancée tore up their marriage contract and married another, fearing he might discover the truth. The matriarch found Xiao Tan, whose voice resembled his fiancée's, to take her place. On their wedding night, with a blindfold over Xie Rongyu's eyes, he kissed Xiao Tan with tender caution, whispering the name Ruer. Xiao Tan had long coveted him, so she immediately kissed him back, indulging herself fully. 3 months later, his eyesight began to recover. The matriarch, deeming Xiao Tan no longer useful, intended to drive her from the manor, but Xiao Tan was already carrying Xie Rongyu's child. Xie Rongyu, the young master of the Xie family, was like an immortal descended to earth. He learned to read at 3 and practiced martial arts at 5. By 12, he was famous for topping the examinations for young scholars. At 15, he became the youngest provincial graduate. At 18, he took the metropolitan exam and won first place. He was then granted an audience with the emperor and appointed a Hanlin compiler. Though Xie Rongyu was only 20 years old, he already held a high position. As a Hanlin scholar, his future was limitless. But a month ago, Xie Rongyu was poisoned. In the current imperial court, the crown prince held great power. This incited the jealousy of his rival, the fourth prince, who sought to seize control. The fourth prince repeatedly struck out to cripple the crown prince's allies, and Xie Rongyu was the crown prince's close friend, as well as his right-hand man. During an excursion, he was ambushed. An assassin showered him with a cloud of toxic powder. Although Xie Rongyu's life was spared, the poison entered his eyes, and he was left blinded. While he traveled south seeking medical treatment, Miss Lin, his betrothed, broke off their engagement. By the time he returned, Miss Lin had already married another. Just then, Xie Rongyu was in the critical stage of his recovery, where emotional distress was to be avoided. With the date of his wedding to Miss Lin approaching, the matriarch decided to select a substitute from among the maids. As it happened, Xiao Tan was similar in stature to Miss Lin, and her voice was nearly identical. Thus, she chose Xiao Tan. The maids were bound by contracts to the manor, and whatever the masters decided, they had no power to refuse. For Xiao Tan, marrying Xie Rongyu even as a concubine, it was a great honor, and the matriarch didn't even have to say much. Xiao Tan accepted it happily. 3 days later, the Xie manor was filled with the sound of gongs and drums. With lanterns and decorations, they made the concubine ceremony as lively as a full wedding. Although Xie Rongyu couldn't see, he was sharp-witted. He had his ears to listen, so he wouldn't be fooled by anything half-hearted. Dressed in bridal red, Xiao Tan held the silk ball with him. They bowed in the main hall. Master Xie and the matriarch sat in the seats of honor, accepting their bows. When looking at Xie Rongyu, the matriarch's face was full of pity, but when looking at Xiao Tan, she looked away with displeasure. Bow to heaven and earth, bow to the elders, bow to each other. Your body is still recovering. You shouldn't overexert yourself. Rest early. Yes, mother. Hurry and help Rongyu back to his room. Yes. Initially, Xiao Tan and Xie Rongyu each held one end of the red silk. Clearly, there was no contact, yet she could feel his tension and unease. But the moment Xiao Tan spoke, Xie Rongyu seemed to soften completely. Lifting the red veil slightly, Xiao Tan led him, and they went to the bridal chamber. Once inside, Xiao Tan helped Xie Rongyu sit down properly. Only then did she have the chance to study his appearance. In the past, servants always had to lower their heads and bow before their masters. When would she ever have a chance to look closely? He was truly handsome, with a high nose bridge and thin lips. His red lips matched the bright red of his wedding attire. He was even more delicate and stunning than a woman. His eyes were covered with a cloth strip. The red cloth contrasted sharply against his fair skin. Xiao Tan licked her lips and then whispered to him, "Husband." Xiao Tan's voice was exactly the same as Xie Rongyu's fiancée, Lin Jingru, exactly. They had been engaged for many years but had always kept to proper etiquette. They did not interact much in private, so as long as Xiao Tan mimicked Lin Jingru's habits, being gentle and shy plus having the same voice, Xie Rongyu would not be able to tell the difference. A slight smile touched his lips as he reached out toward Xiao Tan. His fingers were slender and well-defined, even more beautiful than hands in paintings. Xiao Tan couldn't help but look down at her own. Her fingers were rough, covered in calluses. Miss Lin was raised in luxury. If he touched her hands, wouldn't her cover be blown? A sudden thought struck her. Xiao Tan grabbed a handkerchief and held his hand through the silk fabric. "Now that we are married, why are you still so shy, Ruer?" Xie Rongyu exerted a gentle force with his arm and pulled Xiao Tan into his embrace. His body was taut, as if he were nervous too. He raised his hand, and his slender fingers stroked her cheek a few times. Xiao Tan held her breath in anticipation, fearing he might notice something out of place. He had not been blind for long. Surely he couldn't tell the difference in her features. Indeed, his fingers fell upon her lips, and upon touching her rouge, his movements stopped. "Ruer, now that I am blind, Are you truly willing to marry me? I am willing. Do you have no regrets? No regrets. As soon as the words fell, Xie Rongyu's handsome face leaned in toward Xiao Tan. Though Xiao Tan had long coveted him, she had never even held a man's hand before. With his breath against her face, she closed her eyes in surprise. Her lips felt a soft touch. Xie Rongyu was kissing her. Her waist felt tightened, and Xiao Tan's body was lifted into the air. It was Xie Rongyu picking her up. Even though he could not see, he was quite strong. My lady, where is the bed? 2 steps to your front left. Xie Rongyu took 2 steps to the bedside and set Xiao Tan down, then hovered over her. Xiao Tan thought he was about to do something, but he only fumbled to help her remove her outer robe. As he did, his hands touched her body, and he would pull back slightly each time. Her cheeks flushed red, making her look even lovelier. My eyesight has yet to recover, so I cannot see your face. For tonight, let us not consummate the marriage. Until they woke the next day, Xiao Tan still felt sore all over. Only when a maid knocked on the door did they wake up. Xiao Tan helped Xie Rongyu up, and personally brought him water to wash his face. He was cooperative, upright, and gentle, nothing like the wolf-like person from last night. My lady, thank you. If not for my failing eyesight, I wouldn't be causing you so much trouble. Serving you, my husband, is my duty as your wife. After washing and eating, Xie Rongyu went to the study. He holds an important position, although he cannot see. He has a study boy to read and write on his behalf. His duties at the Hanlin Academy have not fallen behind at all. Once Xie Rongyu left, Xiaoling, the maid serving in the south courtyard, stopped being polite to Xiao Tan. Why aren't you sweeping the floor yet? Do you really think you're Miss Lin? Xiao Tan couldn't be bothered with her. After tidying the bed, she took up her needle and thread and sat in the courtyard to mend the clothes Xie Rongyu had changed out of. Seeing that Xiao Tan ignored her, Xiaoling's anger grew even more. While watering the flowers, she deliberately tilted the pot and soaked Xiao Tan. Oops, I didn't see you there. Xiao Tan was so angry she laughed. She threw down the clothes, wiped her face, and snatched the watering can from Xiaoling's hand. She turned and went to the well to draw water, then dumped a full pot of cold water straight over her head. Are you crazy? I'm not like you. I saw you quite clearly. Xiaoling was livid and tried to pounce on Xiao Tan to fight. Xiao Tan rolled up her sleeves, ready to fight. She wasn't afraid. They wrestled together. Xiaoling slapped Xiao Tan's face, and Xiao Tan yanked her hair. Xiaoling tore at Xiao Tan's outer robe, and Xiao Tan scratched her neck. It was the most common type of street brawl between women. It wasn't until the courtyard gate creaked that they realized Xie Rongyu had actually returned. Xiaoling trembled violently in fear and hurriedly pushed Xiao Tan away. Xiao Tan straightened her hair and met him with her stinging cheek. Thankfully, he couldn't see. Taking a deep breath to steady her voice, Xiao Tan spoke up. Husband, why have you returned? Did you forget something? We are newlyweds. I didn't want you to be bored. I came back to keep you company. What was that noise just now? 2 maids were fighting. I have already punished them. Xie Rongyu nodded to show he understood. Helping him back into the room, Xiao Tan felt a bit troubled. She knew what to do at night, but when spending the day with him, what was she supposed to do? Could you read these documents to me? Of course. Opening the letters, Xiao Tan stumbled through the handwriting on the pages. She was immensely grateful at that moment that she knew how to read. She didn't understand state affairs. It was only after reading the letters that I barely grasped their meaning. But Xie Rongyu reacted with incredible speed. He quickly devised a strategy and asked her to write a reply on his behalf. Xiao Tan's handwriting was terrible, but she dared not mention it. After all, she was currently a stand-in for Lin Jingru, and Lin Jingru was known for her profound erudition. She couldn't bear to look at her own eyesore of a handwriting. Once finished, she hurriedly tucked it away. She wrote the recipient's style name on the cover of the letter. After handling the documents, Xiao Tan let out a quiet sigh of relief. But when she made a sudden movement, the spot where she had been slapped earlier began to ache. She couldn't help but gasp. What is wrong? It is nothing. I just bumped into something. Xie Rongyu grabbed Xiao Tan's hand, feeling along from her palm up to her arm. He explored it bit by bit. Even while blindfolded, she could still sense his focused attention. He pressed his lips together slightly, tilting his head to listen for Xiao Tan's reaction. When his fingers reached her cheek, she couldn't help but wince again. His touch immediately grew lighter. His fingers barely grazed her skin, gentle and patient. Why is it swollen? It always swells up in the morning. It'll be fine in a little while. Then why is it only swollen on one side? At that moment, Xie Rongyu's slender, pale hands cupped Xiao Tan's face. Even though she knew he couldn't see her, Xiao Tan still felt bashful and uneasy. My husband, your clothes are torn. What is your name? Xiao Tan's hair stood on end and her scalp went numb in an instant. Instinctively forcing a smile, she opened her lips and replied, What are you saying, husband? I am Ruer. I know you are not. Xiao Tan even forgot how to breathe. She anxiously pondered when she had revealed her flaws. Was it because she was too brazen last night? Or was it that her skin felt too rough to the touch, unlike that of a pampered young lady from a wealthy family? Or perhaps, even if her voice sounds similar, her temperament simply cannot be faked. Did she expose herself without realizing it? What is your name? Xiao Tan closed her eyes and resignedly replied, Xiao Tan. Xiao Tan, I recall there is a maid in the manor, named Xiao Tan. Young master, that is me. Xiao Tan lost both her parents at a young age and survived by doing laundry for others. When she was 12, the clothes she was washing were stolen. She hadn't earned her coins yet, and instead had to pay the owners back with the coins she had saved over several years. With no other options, she sold herself into service at the Xie Manor. But the Xie Manor wasn't an easy place to stay, and since she was young, she was constantly bullied. Sometimes when meals were served, it would all be snatched away before she could even eat. One time, starving and unable to bear it any longer, Xiao Tan went to the kitchen and stole a steamed bun. She was caught red-handed, and the steward remarked that it is hardest to guard against thieves within one's own house, saying he would deal with her directly to avoid future trouble. It just so happened that Xie Rongyu had returned from his studies and stumbled upon the scene. He spoke up for her. If one were not starving, who would choose to steal or rob? If you let the people in this manor go hungry like this, you should reflect on your own mistakes. Xie Rongyu pardoned Xiao Tan's offense and even had a servant give her a portion of the snacks he had brought back. The steward later strictly investigated bullying in the manor, and because of Xie Rongyu's words, no one ever dared to bully her again. Xiao Tan's status was low, and she could only work in the back courtyard, never finding an opportunity to thank him in person. Later, she bought a collection of Xie Rongyu's poetry and began teaching herself to read, asking here and there over the course of 5 years. She finally managed to recognize all the characters in the book. She had never forgotten his kindness of a single meal, and always hoped to find a chance to thank him. Who could have known the turns of fate would lead to her being chosen as a substitute bride for Xie Rongyu? Seemingly having heard Xiao Tan's rapid breathing, Xie Rongyu's warm hands grasped hers. He rubbed the calluses on her palms and comforted her gently. Do not be afraid, Xiao Tan. I will not do anything to you. Young master, when did you realize I was not Miss Lin? Last night. Last night when I kissed you. You smelled of soap locust. Jingru has never done manual labor in her life. She would never have that scent. Young master, I am sorry. It is all right, Xiao Tan. That scent is not unpleasant. Furthermore, I can deduce how mother chose you to impersonate of Jingru. Back when I was at my lowest, you were willing to agree to her request. No matter what, I am grateful for your good intentions. Xie Rongyu exerted a gentle pressure with his palm, pulling Xiao Tan into his arms. Xiao Tan, we have already bowed to heaven and earth. Therefore, from this day forward, you are my wife, Xie Rongyu's wife, rightfully and honorably. Xie Rongyu was truly clever. He had guessed that Lin Jingru would break off the engagement, and he had also guessed that Mother Xi would find a substitute bride. He was also very kind, never exposing his mother's intentions. Instead, he played along and completed the wedding. He did not look down on Xiao Tan either, and was grateful for her sacrifice, even opening his heart to her to put her mind at ease. Xiao Tan, I hadn't paid any attention to you before, and I don't remember what you look like. It is okay, you can touch my face. Xiao Tan took Xie Rongyu's hand and placed it against her face. He touched it lightly, afraid of hurting her skin. Finally, he leaned in slowly and kissed the swollen area on her face. Does it still hurt? It doesn't hurt anymore. Don't fight anymore. If anyone bullies you, tell me. I didn't lose just now. She was hurt worse than I was. Xie Rongyu couldn't help but curve his lips in a smile. When he smiled, he looked as radiant as the warm sun. Xiao Tan's heart felt like it was melting. Even when dinner arrived, she still felt as if she were in a dream. She was meant to be a body double, to comfort Xie Rongyu while his eyes were healing. But never did she expect that, on the very night of the wedding, he had already sensed something was wrong. Xiao Tan had stumbled into good fortune, earning his acceptance. Since ancient times, men have been fickle. Even if he were to marry a new wife in the future, she had to make the most of her current life, to live a good life for a while, eating well, dressing well, and sleeping well. Because Xie Rongyu's eyes were sensitive, he didn't read at night. Whatever he wanted to hear, Xiao Tan would read to him. He leaned back on the couch with Xiao Tan resting against him, holding the book and reading word by word. Living in an age of prosperity and sainthood, Dian carriages and horses. That character is pronounced Dian, as in Dian South carriages and horses. You've already memorized it, so why do you still want to listen? The same text carries different insights during different periods of one's life. Xie Rongyu held Xiao Tan's hand while explaining gently. Ever since he learned of Xiao Tan's identity, he loved to stroke the calluses on her hands most of all. He said they were proof of her hard work. Actually, I think there is something more enjoyable than reading. Oh, what is it? The little joys between a husband and wife, of course. Xiao Tan, a pure heart and few desires lead to endless contentment. The candlelight flickered, casting a dim glow on Xie Rongyu's face, reflecting against his slightly flushed cheeks, combined with the cloth blindfold over his eyes. It was a soul-stirring sight. Xiao Tan didn't care for his philosophical preachings. She tossed the book aside and pounced on him. Xiao Tan. Xie Rongyu only had time to utter those two words before his mouth was sealed by Xiao Tan. He had gained the upper hand last time, but this time she was determined to conquer him. At first, Xiao Tan was on top, but somehow it ended up with Xie Rongyu on top instead. This man, despite his talk of being pure-hearted, was like a wolf starving for days once they got entangled. Xiao Tan could barely keep up with him. At night, once he had fallen asleep, Xiao Tan tossed and turned, unable to sleep. She decided to get up and sew a sachet. Since Xie Rongyu couldn't see, lighting the candle wouldn't bother him at all. He once said she smelled of soap berries, so Xiao Tan tucked some soap berries inside the sachet. That way, whenever he smelled the sachet, he would be reminded of her. By the time day broke and Xie Rongyu rose, Xiao Tan's sachet was finished. With dark circles under her eyes, she happily handed the sachet to him. Xiao Tan, what did you embroider? I embroidered myself. Good. Xie Rongyu smiled along with her, fumbling to hang the sachet onto his person. Knowing she hadn't slept all night, he urged her to rest. He even pushed back the time for paying respects to the matriarch. For the first time, Xiao Tan realized that life could be this comfortable. She could sleep in as late as she wanted, without fear of being scolded or punished. When she finally woke up, Chaoling came to help her dress with red, teary eyes. She still wore a look of reluctance, but the hostility from before was gone. The young master said he knows who you are now. He told me to treat you well, and not to bully you over things from the past. Xiao Tan, how on earth did you get so lucky? I suppose I am quite lucky. From that day on, life grew increasingly comfortable for Xiao Tan. Every few days, Xie Rongyu would go to the clinic to change his bandages. Xiao Tan would always accompany him. When his spirits were high, his eyes recovered more quickly. The doctor said his sight should be restored in another month or two. Seeing this, the old madam assumed Xiao Tan was simply doing a good job playing Lin Jingru and was happy to let it be. Xie Rongyu slipped something into Xiao Tan's hand. How did you know I liked candy? You have a sweet scent about you. Xiao Tan was skeptical. After all, she had saved up copper coins for so long, rarely allowing herself the treat of buying sugar. The last time she had any was 6 months ago. When she shared this with Xie Rongyu, he asked, Xiao Tan, how much money have you saved? 3 taels of silver and 4 qian of copper coins. Xiao Tan's monthly allowance was 2 qian. By scrimping and saving, she could put away a little over 1 qian a month. It would take over a year to save 1 tael. She had been sold to the Xie household at 12. It had been 5 years now. Once she saved 4 taels, she could buy her freedom and become a commoner. No wonder I always hear a jingling sound on you. Is that the sound of coins clinking? Yes. Xiao Tan took Xie Rongyu's hand and guided it to the string of copper coins hanging at her waist. The clinking of the common rustic coins was the most beautiful sound to her. She popped a piece of malt candy into her mouth. So sweet. Xiao Tan gave a piece to Xie Rongyu as well. Is it sweet? Not as sweet as you. Months passed, and Xie Rongyu's eyes improved even further. He could already vaguely make out some outlines. Coincidentally, it was his birthday, so they prepared some wine and food. They sat in the courtyard, drinking and singing beneath the moon. My parents died early. Xiao Tan didn't have many memories of her childhood. It was a very bitter life when I was young. The only sweetness I had was a nursery rhyme. I only remember my mother singing it to me. Lanterns light the narrow path, bright and red. Fireflies dance with a glimmering light as mother hums a lullaby, smiling ever so softly. Sleep now, my darling treasure, rock-a-bye. Xiao Tan sang it to Xie Rongyu to wish him a happy birthday. Xie Rongyu tried to learn it as she sang. Once he had learned it, he asked her which day her birthday was. When is your birthday? Probably in the 8th lunar month. Maybe the 4th day. Then we'll say the 4th of the 8th month. Xiao Tan, let me paint a portrait of you as a birthday gift for you. How about that? Okay. Xiao Tan nodded happily right away, but then she thought of his eyes. You can't see clearly, so how will you paint? As long as I keep your image in my heart, I can just paint slowly when there is light during the day. As Xie Rongyu spoke, his fingers gently traced Xiao Tan's features, from her forehead to her ears, down to her eyes, cheeks, nose, and finally her lips. Xiao Tan, I love you. Finally, he cupped Xiao Tan's face and kissed her with devotion and sincerity. From then on, Xie Rongyu would paint Xiao Tan whenever he had time. Even though though his eyes had yet to recover. He managed to paint a perfectly beautiful person based only on blurred images. It was just slow work. The hair would take 4 or 5 days, and the eyes would take another 4 or 5. At first, Xiao Tan would watch him paint, but later, finding it dull, she found other things to do. Having lived in hardship since childhood, she never had the chance to learn music or art, so she only possessed survival skills. Instead, she would experiment with dishes to make delicious food for Xie Rongyu, or perhaps do some needlework, sewing pretty pouches for him. No matter what Xiao Tan did, Xie Rongyu was always happy. He said her laughter was the most beautiful song of all. Soon, it was the 8th month. Xiao Tan began to look forward to the 4th day with excitement, wondering how Xie Rongyu would celebrate her birthday. That day, Xie Rongyu went to the infirmary and specifically didn't let her follow. So Xiao Tan stayed in the courtyard to mend her clothes. She had been too carried away last night, and he had torn her undergarment. Mending the clothes, she even embroidered a peony on the bodice, thinking happily, "It is so beautifully embroidered. I'll let Xie Rongyu touch it when he gets back." Before long, he returned. "Your BA." Xiao Tan's voice came to an abrupt halt. She hurriedly hid the undergarment behind her back. Following behind Xie Rongyu was a woman. Her figure was graceful. Her appearance was elegant, and she possessed a unique poise. The moment she spoke, Xiao Tan knew who she was. "You. Is this the concubine you've taken?" Her voice was exactly the same as Xiao Tan's. She was none other than Lin Jingru. An inexplicable sense of unease rose in Xiao Tan's heart. Her anxious gaze fell upon Xie Rongyu. Xie Rongyu reached out a hand toward her. Only then did Xiao Tan breathe a sigh of relief, stepping forward to help him. Xie Rongyu's eyes had improved since before. He could vaguely see that Xiao Tan was holding something. After holding her hand, he casually took the undergarment from her. Then he felt the embroidery on it. A peony. Xiao Tan hurriedly snatched the garment back in front of an outsider. How embarrassing. Their private interaction irritated Lin Jingru. She furrowed her slender willow leaf brows. Though her voice was identical to Xiao Tan's, her tone was much softer. It possessed a natural, gentle charm. I've come to see you. Won't you even speak to me?" Xiao Tan subconsciously wanted to pull away, but her wrist tightened. It was Xie Rongyu gripping her firmly. "Lady Chen, if you are here to visit my mother, the front courtyard is the place to go. My wife and I have nothing to say to you." Is this how you look at me? Are you still holding a grudge because I married another? When my eyes were ruined, it was reasonable for you to marry someone else. I do not blame you, but our bond ends there. I was forced to marry, my heart only holds you. Now that I have divorced from the Chen family, are you still willing to have me? The usually gentle Xie Rongyu actually displayed anger. He pulled away from Lin Jingru's hand and lashed out. "Please show some self-respect." Lin Jingru froze, tears streaming down her face. She dared not vent her anger at Xie Rongyu, so she turned her malto towards Xiao Tan. "You rely on your voice sounding like mine to deceive you. How much longer do you plan on tricking him, you commoner? A coarse woman like you is simply unworthy of him." In front of Lin Jingru, Xiao Tan felt naturally inferior. She opened her mouth, but couldn't say a word. Though these words were heard, they still stung her heart deeply. "Xiao Tan." Xie Rongyu's voice brought Xiao Tan back to reality. He walked toward her, and despite his blurred vision, his steps were steady. He pulled Xiao Tan into his arms and looked toward Lin Jingru. "Xiao Tan is my wife with whom I have honored heaven, earth, and my parents. She is straightforward, lovely, strong, and brave. She is the most beautiful and noble woman in my heart." "Miss Lin, your words are insulting. Please leave." Lin Jingru's eyes widened in disbelief until she finally sobbed loudly, turned, and ran away. Xie Rongyu continued to hold Xiao Tan tightly, his tone softening. "Xiao Tan, don't be afraid." The next morning, Xie Rongyu was acting secretive, saying he was going to buy a birthday gift for Xiao Tan and forbid her from following him. Xiao Tan retrieved some soft fabric and stayed home to sew undershirts for him. He said her stitching was skilled and comfortable to wear, so it was perfect to make him some new sets. She had barely taken a few stitches when Xiao Tan's stomach suddenly felt like it was turning over. She rushed to the side to retch. Seeing this, Ling went to fetch a doctor. Once the doctor finished checking her pulse, he beamed with joy. "Congratulations, madam. You are pregnant." Xiao Tan touched her stomach in a daze. "Is there a baby in here?" She hadn't noticed anything at all, and even now, she didn't feel anything unusual. Shortly after, a wave of joy slowly washed over her. She was actually going to be a mother. Xie Rongyu was going to be a father. She stood up and paced around the room twice. Xiao Tan couldn't wait to share this wonderful news with Xie Rongyu. Xiaoling sent the doctor away and returned a moment later. later. Her expression had turned complicated. Xiao Tan, the old madam wants to see you. The old madam isn't going to have me put to death, is she? It shouldn't come to that. That is fine then. In the main hall, old Madam Xie was waiting for Xiao Tan. Seeing her arrive, she tossed a piece of paper directly at her. Picking it up, she realized it was her deed of indenture. You have done well these past few months. Rongyu's eyes are about to heal. I have no further need for you here. He is a man of keen intellect and spirit. He cannot have someone of your lowly origins by his side. Otherwise, it would ruin his reputation. Here is your deed returned to you. I'll give you 10 taels of silver, now go. The nanny by the old madam's side brought over a tray. On it sat plump silver ingots. Xiao Tan stood dazed, holding the silver in her deed. She knew this day would come, but she hadn't expected. Xie Rongyu hadn't cast her aside yet. Yet the old madam had made the first move. Being able to stay by Rongyu's side for this long was already your good fortune. Even if Rongyu were to marry the divorced Miss Lin, it would be far more respectable than marrying you. For now, you are still a servant of the Xie family. If you intend to linger and refuse to leave, do not blame me for resorting to other means. Madam, when should I leave? Now. Thank you, old madam. Xiao Tan was now a free woman, with 10 taels of silver. Added to what she had saved previously, she had nearly 14 taels in total. That was a very large sum of money. Back at the south courtyard, Xiaoling bit her lip as she watched her pack. It wasn't until Xiao Tan shouldered her bundle ready to leave that Xiaoling finally spoke up. Are you really leaving? Yes. What about the young master? The young master will be just fine. A few days ago, Xie Rongyu had a craftsman make a hair ornament. Xiao Tan liked peonies. She didn't really have any jewelry of her own, so he wanted to have a set of peony-themed jewelry made for her birthday. The jewelry was finished, and tomorrow was her birthday. Today, he went specially to pick it up. He reached the silversmith shop and received the jewelry. Xie Rongyu felt them with his fingers. The peony petal-shaped hairpin, the floral-patterned bracelet, and the flower-shaped earrings. Though he had never felt Xiao Tan wearing earrings, and didn't know if she even had pierced ears. But this bracelet and hairpin, they would surely look beautiful on her. Xie Rongyu could already picture her sitting in the courtyard humming a tune, the bracelet adorning her slender wrist, the peony petals in her hair swaying gently with her movements. The only pity was that he could not yet clearly see her face. In his mind's eye, everything was clear except for her features. But his eyes would be better soon, and then he would finally be able to see what Xiao Tan looked like. She spoke with such a light, cheerful tone, always smiling. Her eyes must be so bright, so very bright. Carrying the jewelry box himself, Xie Rongyu took a carriage back to the Xie estate. But the south garden was quiet, and Xiao Tan was nowhere to be found. Xie Rongyu asked Xiaoling, but she only stammered and hesitated. It wasn't until his anger flared that Xiaoling gave a pointed hint. The young mistress was summoned by the old mistress to speak. Thinking of his overbearing mother, Xie Rongyu felt a sudden, inexplicable panic. He turned and rushed toward the main courtyard, nearly tripping over the threshold. When he arrived at the main courtyard, Xiao Tan was nowhere to be seen. Madame Xie was hosting a guest engaged in a pleasant conversation. Xie Rongyu couldn't sense Xiao Tan's presence, so he prepared to look for her elsewhere. But Madame Xie suddenly called out to him, Rongyu, come here. Xie Rongyu frowned but went over to comply, offering a bow to the guest. Rongyu's eyes are still not fully clear at the moment, but they will be fine very soon. I will have to trouble you to look after him then. Young Master Xie is as graceful as a jade tree and talented beyond measure. I wonder how many young ladies would favor him. Once your eyes are better, young master, you will surely be spoiled for choice. Xie Rongyu's expression grew increasingly dark. He had already understood the hidden meaning in their words. His mother was selecting a wife for him, but he already had Xiao Tan. Mother, where is Xiao Tan? Why do you still insist on mentioning that girl? I intend to find you a wife of equal status. What does she have to do with this? Where is Xiao Tan? What did you do to her? What could I have possibly done to her? Rongyu, in your heart, is your mother truly such a dictatorial person? Then tell me, mother, where has Xiao Tan gone? Rongyu, you are an imperial academician. You hold a prestigious position with a bright future ahead. A commoner like her is short-sighted, only interested in vanity and wealth. How could she ever be worthy of standing by your side? I didn't harm her. I simply returned her deed of indenture. I asked if she was willing to leave the Xie estate. If she wanted to stay, she could have remained by your side as a concubine. But if she chose to leave, I would provide her with silver so she wouldn't be mistreated. Once she received the money, she was all smiles and left without saying a word. Has she ever truly held any affection for you? Xie Rongyu didn't believe a word of it. He only heard one piece of useful information. Xiao Tan is gone. He turned and left immediately. Rongyu, she was just a lowly servant. Let her go. I can find you someone anyone else, whoever you desire. The only wife I acknowledge is Xiao Tan. Apart from her, I have no other intentions. Xie Rongyu had his servant prepare the carriage, intending to go out and look for Xiao Tan himself. But after circling the city, he realized he had no idea where to even begin searching for her. In their past conversations, Xiao Tan had mentioned that she had no parents and had long since lost her home. Where could she have gone? A lonely, helpless woman. How could she survive in the chaotic streets? With so much silver on her, what if she ran into villains? Xie Rongyu dared not think about it further. Back at the estate, he gathered all the servants, asking who was close to Xiao Tan, hoping to learn something about her from them. But after asking everyone, no one knew where she was from or if she had any kin. Xie Rongyu wanted to have a portrait drawn to aid the search, but his eyes had not yet fully healed. He couldn't even remember what she looked like. He had others in the house draw her from memory. They collected over a dozen portraits, but Xiaoling said none of them looked like her. Xie Rongyu was anxious and burning with impatience, yet felt helpless. He could only entrust his colleagues to order the guards. Intercept any woman named Xiao Tan attempting to leave the city. I hope to find a way to make her stay. Half a month passed. Xie Rongyu's eyes recovered, but Xiao Tan was still nowhere to be found. He looked at the portraits he had collected, yet none of them captured Xiao Tan's likeness. The portrait he drew himself. Xiaoling said it was the most accurate, yet she couldn't point out exactly what felt off about it. Xie Rongyu could only gaze at the portrait to soothe his longing. When matchmakers came to propose, he strictly refused. I have already taken a wife, and shall have no other heart but hers. That was just a concubine we allowed you to take. She is not your wife at all. If that is the case, when I find her, I will marry her properly. If you insist on marrying a commoner, then get out of this house. Xie Rongyu immediately separated from his mother. He moved out to start his own household. Using his own assets, he bought a new residence. He hired a new staff of servants, the only ones who came with him. From the Xie estate were his valet and Xiaoling. Xie Rongyu wandered through and around the city whenever he had the chance, always hoping to run into Xiao Tan. 3 years passed in the blink of an eye. Xie Rongyu was now the chancellor of the Hanlin Academy. With the emperor's health failing, the crown prince was set to ascend the throne. Xie Rongyu had become a highly sought-after figure. Subordinate officials sent him endless gifts of beautiful women. He declined them all politely. I am already married. My home has no room for a second woman. Yet no one knew who his wife was. For those 3 years, Xie Rongyu had no contact with the Xie estate. Madame Xie regretted her actions deeply. Her several attempts at reconciliation were rejected. Xie Rongyu even sent her a final word. If Xiao Tan returns, our bond as mother and son may continue. If she does not, please consider yourself without a son. Why must it be her? Why must it be Xiao Tan? Xie Rongyu couldn't even explain it himself. Back when he first lost his sight, his spirits were incredibly low. Once a golden child, he found himself suddenly in darkness. He felt the world held no meaning for him anymore. Friends urged him to head south for treatment, but he believed there wasn't a doctor alive who could fix his eyes. Why bother with a futile effort? Or perhaps he was afraid that if he went, he would lose the last shred of hope he had left. That day at the estate, he was ripping at the flowers and plants in the courtyard as if venting his frustration. He didn't even notice when the flower stems pricked his hands. Then he suddenly heard a familiar voice. What are you doing? These flowers and plants have it hard enough. They worked so hard to bloom for you, letting you smell their fragrance. How could you bear to do that? The person didn't treat him like a blind man at all. She pulled him aside and began to replant the flowers that had been uprooted. She murmured as she planted, "It's okay, don't cry. Big sister will make it all better for you. The roots are just a little broken. It won't stop you from blooming beautifully. See, you'll live." That voice was identical to his fiancée, Lin Jingru's, but it carried a completely different kind of vitality and a faint scent of soap nuts, which made his heart feel warm. It was as if all the filth had been swept away. It felt very clean. Perhaps having finished planting the flowers, she turned around and noticed Xie Rongyu. She was startled. "Young master." Xie Rongyu waved his hand. Just then, a servant happened to find him and helped him return to the South Garden. From that moment on, Xie Rongyu decided to seek medical treatment in the South. After 2 months of treatment in the South, he returned to the capital because it was time to fulfill his marriage contract. He had always been indifferent and felt that marrying anyone was the same, as long as he fulfilled his responsibilities as a husband afterward. But on his wedding night, as he held his bride, he froze when he smelled a hint of soap nuts. It was her, the girl whose voice was identical to Lin Jingru's. Thinking perhaps his mother had forced her to take someone's place, he decided against consummating the marriage. He would wait until he could talk it through with her and figure out her own wishes before making a decision. But unexpectedly, she had pounced on him instead. It turned out her name was Xiao Tan. She had a faint scent of soap nuts about her, and she spoke very cheerfully. She was always smiling. She could do so many things: wash clothes, cook, and embroider, and she could even read and write. Although the characters she wrote looked like chickens missing their feet, standing all crooked and wobbly. All the official documents she wrote on his behalf, he retrieved them all from his colleagues. He kept them carefully in his study. Whenever he missed her, he would take them out to look at them. She had sewn many sachets for him. She embroidered flowers on every one of his undershirts. She also loved copper coins. She would string them together and hang them from her waist. They would jingle every time she walked. When sleeping at night, she liked to hold on to him, with her arms and legs wrapped around him. This feeling of being needed made Xie Rongyu feel very secure. No one else could ever give him this feeling again. And so, apart from Xiao Tan, he vowed never to marry again. But he had already been searching for 3 years, without finding a single trace of Xiao Tan. Finally, the emperor passed away, and the crown prince ascended the throne. Xie Rongyu became a powerful minister. At that time, there was a major flood in the south. The new emperor summoned Xie Rongyu for a private meeting. If he succeeded in controlling the floods in the south, he would become the prime minister upon returning to the capital, a position second only to the emperor. Xie Rongyu agreed. He took only a few guards and traveled light. He journeyed south to Huizhou. By day, he worked at the prefectural office, managing the flood relief. In his spare time, he would go out and wander around to experience the lives of the common people. Xiao Tan had once told him about the hard life she had lived. The common folk struggled just to find their next meal, a hunger that these officials could never truly understand. Only by becoming like them could he truly understand them. And so, all these years, Xie Rongyu had never stayed away from the people. He thought that if he continued to speak up for the people, perhaps heaven would open its eyes and bring Xiao Tan back to him. The flooding within the city had been largely brought under control. The people were getting back on their feet. The streets were filled with hawkers calling out, and farmers arriving in the city to work. Xie Rongyu suddenly heard a jingling sound. He turned to look. He noticed that a middle-aged woman selling lanterns had a string of coins hanging from her waist. In that split second, his dead heart showed signs of coming back to life. He walked to the stall immediately and bought a lantern. Then he asked the woman, "Where did you get that coin ornament?" "I made it myself." "Does everyone know how to make them?" "Yes, though no one knew how to at first. Later, we realized it was very convenient to carry coins that way. Everyone started learning how to do it." "Who was the first one to weave them?" "I don't know." Xie Rongyu had to return empty-handed. 2 months later, the flood control in the south was complete. Xie Rongyu was set to return to the capital. Many commoners, hearing that the high official from the capital was leaving, gathered on the streets to watch. They all came out to the streets to witness the departure. Xie Rongyu rode on horseback with a calm expression. He had left some men behind here. Should any clues about Xiao Tan arise, they would report to him immediately. A childish singing voice drifted over. Lanterns light the path bright and red while fireflies dance around, shimmering bright as mother hums a lullaby. Xie Rongyu looked over immediately. A chill surged up his back, nearly freezing him in place. That melody, it was the nursery rhyme Xiao Tan used to sing. His eyes quickly locked onto the singer, a boy of 3 or 4 years old. His eyes were bright and shimmering. He was curiously eyeing Xie Rongyu. He was dressed neatly and held a tang hulu in his hand. Xie Rongyu's gaze was too intense. Whether out of fear or shyness, the boy hesitated. He suddenly ducked into the crowd and ran away. Xie Rongyu disregarded everything else. He dismounted and chased after him. The boy was agile, weaving through the crowd. Xie Rongyu followed closely behind. Fearing he might frighten the child, he deliberately slowed his pace. He stayed a distance behind the boy until the child ran into a courtyard. Xie Rongyu walked to the entrance, the gate slightly ajar. A woman inside was shouting, "Xie Sijin, you stole my coins again to buy tang hulu." It was the voice he had been longing for, day and night, full of vitality, bright and cheerful. Even though she was scolding, he could tell she wasn't truly angry. Xie Rongyu's vision blurred slightly. He quickly wiped his face and pushed open the courtyard gate. The woman in the yard was dressed in casual attire, sleeves rolled up for work, with her sleeves tucked away. Her hair was tied in a bun, neat and simple. Her features were much like the ones in his paintings, yet she was far more vibrant, full of life. Xie Rongyu's barren life seemed to be ignited by her existence. "Young master." Xie Rongyu hurried toward her and held her in a tight embrace.